Hey, Arctic friends and family, let's talk about refrigerated freight in Corona times. We count ourselves very fortunate that as food haulers, we are considered essential in that for the most part, our business has been permitted to continue to operate. We know of many friends who don't fall into the category of essential workers, and we are absolutely aware of the significant hardships that they're going through as they try and figure out how to help those businesses survive, as they try to figure out how to help their families navigate these times without income. And so we want to keep that kind of as a grounding principle in all of our thoughts that we share, because we are very fortunate to be able to continue working. And yet that doesn't mean that we don't experience challenges and changes in these very unique days. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about freight right now in the middle of April 2020. We have just passed 1 month of my girls, my children, being out of school in Ohio schools, and the stay-at-home order has been extended until May the 1st as of right now. The unique days, and there's a lot of things that are happening all tied together that are having an impact on what we're seeing right now in the refrigerated food freight market. What we're seeing is that volumes are soft. They're definitely soft, and I want to talk about some of the reasons why. If you're already hauling food, you know that they're soft because your wheels are just not turning as much as they normally are. But let's talk first about closures, right? There's all sorts of things that are simply closed that I don't think we realize how much food they would normally be buying and selling. Things like stadiums, arenas, ballparks. It's supposed to be baseball season. There's supposed to be dime a dog nights happening where lots of food is bought by those arenas and then sold. Amusement parks completely shut down. Schools completely shut down. Bars completely shut down. Movie theaters and other theaters completely shut down. Every single one of those locations normally buys and sells food products. Every time they buy and sell, they have to order more, and every time they order more, that means we get to move freight from A to B, and that is simply not happening for any of those types of businesses. Then we have things that have been drastically reduced. Talking about airport traffic, not very many people are flying today, and if you think of all the restaurants and kind of convenience stores, coffee shops, bars that exist in airports, there is a significant volume of food product that is moved through those venues. I heard last week that the TSA had screened in one day something like 100,000 people, compared to the normal 3 million air travelers that we would see in U.S. airports in one single day in the U.S. So if you're having a reduction from 3 million people down to 100,000, think about how little food is being sold through those places. Therefore, they're not making orders. Therefore, there's not as much freight that needs to be delivered. Also, hospitals. Hospitals move a lot of food, and you might think, well, hospitals are filled right now because of COVID-19. Actually, it's quite the opposite. Where there are bad outbreaks, yes, there are intensive care units that are very full, and there are COVID-19 floors that are very full, but the hospitals themselves are not. They've canceled many elective procedures to try to make space to care for those who might get sick with coronavirus. But If we've done a good job of flattening the curve, then that means not as many people have gotten sick, which is wonderful. But hospitals also buy food and move food, and there's less food that is being ordered because there are fewer patients in hospital beds right now. Then you've got things that have been reduced because they can't have sit-in meals anymore. All they can do is carry out and delivery. Coffee shops, restaurants, and especially if you think of fancy restaurants where they don't typically do carry-out service. Those are the places that have seen the greatest reduction in what they're ordering. Many of them have simply closed, and they're not trying to do some sort of carry-out service. Others are still letting people call in and do orders. And then you've got new places doing delivery that never did delivery before, but they are simply not moving the same volume of food that they were prior to all these shutdowns and slowdowns and shelter-in-place warnings and orders. Couple statistics that I thought were very interesting. Bacon. Let's talk about bacon, because who doesn't love bacon? 70% of all the bacon that is consumed in the United States is consumed outside of the home. I don't mean you make it in the kitchen, you carry it out to the back patio, and you eat it on the back patio outside of the home. I mean outside of the home as in restaurants. Other food service places where you go to McDonald's and you order a bacon, egg, and cheese McMuffin, or a bacon cheeseburger at Wendy's. All sorts of breakfast places, and interestingly enough, 70% of all the bacon goes there. And if those places are not serving the way they normally would serve, then obviously there is not as much bacon that needs to be processed or shipped or purchased because it's not being sold. 50% of all cheese sales in the US go to the food service industry. And between March 1st and March 22nd, restaurants lost $25 billion in sales and 3 million jobs. All of that affects the flow of freight around the country. In March, we saw crazy panic buying, and freight volumes temporarily soared because grocery stores were empty and they were trying as quickly as they could to restock and restock and restock. And for a period of time, freight went absolutely nuts. But what happens is when something spikes up, it typically falls back down. And so as people stocked up on the things they were nervous about, i.e. toilet paper, canned goods, things that they can buy and that will last, now they don't need to buy it. So that means now the grocery stores don't need to order it, and that means that we don't need to haul it. So there are fewer miles being driven by truck drivers today because the buying has slowed down. There are other limitations that are influencing the quantity of freight that is being moved as well. Not as much right now, but a couple weeks ago we saw limitations being placed on quantity. You can only buy 1 gallon of milk. You can only buy, 1 or 2 of this or 1 or 2 of that, instead of, buy whatever you want, because stores were responding to their shelves having been wiped out. But what that accidentally does is it hurts everybody behind them in the chain. It hurts truckers, it hurts processors, it hurts production plants, because they have an artificial limitation on what somebody is able to purchase. There's also now a limitation on the number of people that can be in the grocery store at any one period in time. So, reasonably, we would expect to see fewer visits to the grocery store, simply because people want to limit exposure. And number 2, if the last time you went you had to wait in line for 30 minutes to get in, you're probably not going to go do that just to go pick up one item. You're going to wait until you have a full grocery list, then go and maybe wait in line, maybe not wait in line. I have not had to wait in line at my local grocery store yet, but they do have a place set up outside where they will put you in a queue if they have too many people. There are meat processing facilities that are shutting down. They're shutting down because of COVID illness amongst workers. That produces fewer truckloads that need moved. There's also meat producers who are slowing their production because orders are way down. And you know what? When things just get difficult economically, when people's personal pocketbooks are suffering because they don't have work, they don't have an income coming in, then buying patterns change. All of a sudden, maybe steak isn't an option anymore. Maybe all of a sudden roast isn't an option anymore. Maybe we're looking for whatever our lowest cost types of foods would be. Maybe it's rice and beans. Maybe it's mac and cheese. I always think of my parents that when they got married, they said we lived on Kraft macaroni and cheese 7 nights a week, and 1 night a week we got hot dogs with the mac and cheese because they didn't have any money, and mac and cheese was so cheap when they got married. That was what they ate. And you know what? When times are tough, you got to do what you got to do to press on and to carry forward. But those buying patterns change, and that influences what needs shipped and what doesn't need shipped. So if all of a sudden people are not buying as much chicken, then producers don't have as much chicken to ship. Things like organic, I would expect, are seeing a reduction in sales because those things come with a premium price. And when people aren't working, they can't pay a premium price for a product that they normally would want to buy, but maybe today they can't afford to buy it. So freight is soft right now in the refrigerated world. And I anticipate that freight continuing to fluctuate a little bit up and down. I think there will be some temporary increases in volume, but it would seem as though while restaurants are shut down, while everything is suffering a significant shutdown, we are going to continue to see much slower than normal freight volumes. How are we handling that here at Arctic Express? We are doing everything we can to keep our drivers moving, and I think that we have done that with good success. We absolutely cannot say it's business as usual. We can't say that freight is booming, but we can happily say our drivers are moving, albeit perhaps a bit slower than they typically would be. But we're keeping everybody moving because volumes are going to pick back up. I don't know if it's going to be next week. I don't know if it's going to be in 2 weeks. I don't know if it's going to be in 3 weeks, but volumes are going to pick back up. The curve has been flattened with this COVID-19, and at least the state of Ohio is already discussing ways in which they can start to roll out kind of a ramp up, returning the economy back to full operation. Is going to take some time, but they are already planning those phases of allowing certain portions, certain segments of the industry to reopen and to come back, and then wait and see what happens with COVID cases. We don't want to just unleash everybody and then have a huge spike and have hospitals overwhelmed. That's what we've been trying to avoid this whole time. For those in trucking, I want to tell you that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Thankfully, we are still working. We're able to generate income for our drivers, and freight volumes will pick back up. Summer's coming. I'm looking forward to these quarantines being lifted, and backyard barbecues and 4th of July fireworks hopefully are still going to happen. Maybe even Memorial Day cookouts. All of that stuff is right around the corner. Guys, would you do me a favor? Leave a comment this week and let us know what you're seeing in the freight world, what you're hauling, if you're hauling dry or refrigerated goods, and are your miles per week up or down? And as always, guys, we're going to get through this together and stay safe out on these roads that currently have far less traffic than they normally do.